back out here with you with the Model 638 Smith & Wesson airweight revolver. It's a 38 special plus P with an 1 7/8 barrel. What we're going to do right now is, I don't know, it's a 9 or 10 year review. I can't quite remember. I've carried this for many years. I carried it every day for 5 years in a under the shirt shoulder style holster. So it does have quite a bit of wear just from that, but I've also shot this. I don't even know how many rounds I've put through this, but I've put a grundle of rounds through it. This has been an excellent firearm. I have no complaints about it. I do imagine that because it is aluminum, eventually I will probably wear this gun out with the amount of carry and amount of shooting I do with it. But that's to be expected. Take the grips off, there's a lot less to that gun. Let's hope that's the right size. Oh, that'll be perfect. Now, something that I've wanted to see is I have carried this under my arm for probably 5 years straight, 50 hours a day. And I want to see how the internal mechanism has handled all the moisture. On the outside, it's handled it well. You have an aluminum frame, stainless cylinder, stainless barrel, and then you've got a titanium surround around the firing pin. You would hope that they'd have no issues on the inside, but we'll find out. If it's full of rust, we will know why. Now, there you go. That's what she looks like inside. This now should come out. I should have taken that out to begin with. Revolvers are not one of those items that you field strip all the time. So, or well, maybe you do, but I do not. You can see I got a nice buildup of carbon on this arm here. Now this arm is also stainless steel. But inside here, it's not corrosion, but you can see you have carbon buildup. Here's where the hammer goes back and forth. So when you cock this back, it loads this spring. It also loads this spring right here. I don't know what all these internal parts are called. To watch the internal mechanism go as you cock it. Put my finger over here, pull the trigger. This is the first time I've taken one of these apart. What this is to show you what has happened after having this for 9 or 10 years. And that's everyday carry under the arm for 5 of those years. So here she is. This is what our internals look like right now. They actually look fantastic. I'm looking at this. I'm not seeing anything that really raises any concerns. I was a little worried if I'd see rust or some type of buildup there, but it looks like all these parts here are working flawlessly together. Ultimately, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to take this apart. This is either going to be bad or it's going to be good for me. Like I said, I don't really know what each of these parts is called or what they do, so we will just we'll see what happens, right? I am curious. Maybe I'll take apart my Taurus. We'll see if that's been holding up as well too. So the first thing we need to do, take off the spring tension here. Way easier to get this spring off and on. That's got to be the right way to do it, right? That comes out there. That lightened up the trigger pull dramatically. Okay. Let's get the trigger up, this comes straight out. That's a two-part assembly. Look at that in a little bit. Now that's spring loaded, so I got to be careful with that. You're not supposed to do that. Well, just figured that one out. I'll be back. But thanks to ye old speaker magnets, I was able to luckily catch this pin and the spring. Now, luckily they were attached when I found them. There is a possibility those could have come apart, and that would have been fun, right? So now that spring and pin assembly goes into that little dilly whopper right there. That is filthy. So, what do we learn? Tools needed? Probably all the right tools, right? And then, or be like me and don't use all the right tools. Make sure you got your magnets with you though. Okay, so you leave that spring on, but you push this piece forward, and now that comes out like that. I've got this, I just never use it, right? So I do have that tool still somewhere. You know, and if it wouldn't leave just a giant hole in there, I would definitely just make this disappear. It is kind of tempting to just put in some JB weld. That would be probably the correct way to do things, right? A little bit of JB weld in there, and problem solved. Okay, there you have your firing pin. So now, got to figure out how to get this doohickey here off. And it goes up, it pushes this lever. That lever is also found right here. Okay, that is what catches the cylinder and rotates the cylinder around. Well, hey, you don't learn anything until you try, right? Let's do this. Just see what happens. I mean, what could go wrong? Have to send it to a locksmith. Okay. No going back now. I don't know how I'm gonna reset that spring. And so there's a tiny little spring in there that pushes against that little rod. This just looks like a disaster waiting to happen to me. You don't want that hitting your eyeball. I can tell you that right now. There we go. Okay. Look at that. Fantastic. This trigger now should come out fairly easily.
How old is that?
10 years. It's just a bunch of gunk from my armpit and stuff. Once again, this one's got a light spring on it. So if you go up too far, you're going to be using your magnet to find it. There we go. It is a tight fit between that post. Things you do for science. A lot of these parts look like they might be sintered metal. I've got a little bit of rust in this hammer area, but I'm not seeing any rust anywhere else. And there we go, that's got a little spring in it too. Getting used to these little springs everywhere. So there you have it. So I'm going to clean this stuff up, re-lube this whole thing, put it back together. I don't really care about cleaning my firearms, and I know that bothers some people considerably, but if a firearm's not going to operate dirty, and I'm not talking like just, you know, completely caked on, but if it's not going to operate with some fouling on it, I really don't think it's a reliable enough firearm to risk your life on. After I get these cleaned up, we'll see if I can get this back together. So, like I said, this is not a disassembly and assembly video, but it was to see what 10 years of wear and tear on one of these is like. Like I said, 5 of those years was everyday carry for probably 60 hours a week under an arm. So this thing year-round saw massive amounts of moisture and heat, unwanted things that normally you'd have in a firearm. I am thoroughly impressed. The only amount of rust I'm finding is just a small, just negligible amount right here on this hammer, and that's full of lint. But guess what? This thing, I mean, look how dirty this is. This has never been cleaned inside, but this thing has worked flawless. I have never had a malfunction with this. I would trust my life to this any day of the week. So that little spring right there, gotta get it in the right hole. So when that goes back into there, it just free floats unless that spring's pushed up. And then you push this in, and then that spring will keep this in place. So I always love a finely machined piece, right? That comes out of bar stock or something like this, or even the frame right here, or this cylinder. But I mean, this meets up. It has to meet a price point. It needs to be affordable for other people to buy, and being able to use, you know, sintered metal parts, right, allows them to keep the price point down and really mechanically flawless. I mean, this thing has no issues. I can't say too much. So they've been able to give us good pricing, find a way to lessen the cost of manufacturing without cheapening the actual firearm and its ability to work and function. So a win-win. I hope this was enlightening, and more than that, I hope that I can get this thing back together. So if not, maybe I'll just put this on eBay as pieces and parts and fancy little paperweights. Smith & Wesson 638 airweight. Apparently you take all the guts out, that even weighs less. The amazing thing is, if you get the 357 version of this, it's actually lighter, if I remember right. It's been a while since I researched it, but it's even lighter because the cylinder is a titanium cylinder, which, I mean, you put titanium in anything, it makes it better, right? I mean, that just goes without saying. You can see here where I've carried that for so many years. You do see where it's wearing through, got through the finish here, some wear marks on the barrel and such right there. But ultimately, this thing's ready for another 10-20 years. And the truth of the matter is it is made with a lighter weight, less durable material. So there are sacrifices that you do have to make. This is tremendously easier to carry than a standard full weight, non-airweight version of the Smith & Wesson J-frame. This is what I call a SGD pistol, right? What I need is a pistol that works well, that I can fire well, and it's gonna fire every time. And that's exactly what this has been and will be for many years to come. There she is. But before I put this all together, I would like to take apart a Taurus M85, I believe it is. I think it's from maybe like the 1992 era. Not 100% sure on it. It's actually a very well built gun. So here is the M85 version of this, to some extent. They're both J-frame pistols. You can see the similarities between the two. Even it looks like the hammer and the trigger material are the same, that sintered metal. Now, one of the major differences between these two is this one has a bigger cylinder gap than this one. This one has a smoother trigger, and this one is steel, where this one's aluminum and stainless steel. This one does have more propensity to have issues with rust if not properly cared for, but the benefit of its extra weight is that it is a joy and a pleasure to shoot. Now, this particular one, I haven't had any problems whatsoever. So let's get this apart. I'm just going to take the cover plate off. I'm not going to break this one all the way down unless I encounter some problem that was unforeseen. Now I am seeing a little bit of discoloration where this has been, it looks like it was laser engraved with the serial number, made in Brazil, all that fun stuff. So I better get that cleaned up so that doesn't become a potential rust site. Now because this is all steel, they don't need a titanium shroud around the firing pin. All right, now got the plate off of this, and that looks a lot simpler. But you can see just the basic principle is the same. The implementation is different. As I got looking at this a little bit more, I did notice that the frame is starting to get a little bit of rust on it. Okay, that is nothing to do with Taurus, it's just this is a steel gun. That is one thing about the Revolvers, is that to get in here and clean the little bits out, it's a little bit more of a pain in the neck. So I did this part off camera. I took this little plate out, it spans this gap right in here, pushes that spring up, and that's what gives your hammer its power. Now the next step, we just take that off. So far this is considerably easier. Oh, that might be, oh shoot. That's actually a little easier than the Smith was. I would say, I'm not saying this stuff isn't high quality, but I would say so far it does feel like the Smith's internals were a little bit better. Got this put back together. I've cleaned up the rust. The inside of this thing had just a very minor surface rust on it, but it was enough that it concerned me. So I coated everything up with frog lube. Really have grown to enjoy that stuff, and it still functions as smooth as ever. So what I think is interesting is the inside of this is machined to a much lower standard than the Smith & Wesson. The hammer and trigger are on par with quality. Most of the stuff's on par with quality, but the actual machining and fit and finish inside is considerably less than what the Smith & Wesson was. And yet the trigger pull is smoother. It's a little bit lighter for double action. It's a nice crisp trigger pull for single action. One of the major differences also I noticed is like in the hammer mechanism. On the Smith & Wesson, everything is able to be disassembled to the smallest pin and smallest spring. Where this hammer mechanism has some permanent pins in it, and you can only take it down so far. You are not able to remove this spring-loaded doohickey right there. The mechanism is different. It's very similar in many ways, and I think in its simplicity, I don't know if I'd ever say it's better, although this particular one does run better. It just boggles my mind though that this can be so much rougher on the inside, and yet the trigger is so much smoother. As I was cleaning this, the rough edges often would snag on the Q-tips, the pipe cleaners, or the rag I was using and leave fuzzies around. But you know, on the outside though, its fit and finish is better than my Smith. Anyway, these are not garbage, and it's a very good firearm. But it is interesting to see the differences between the two. If you're looking for a concealable firearm that you're not worried about moisture affecting, this is an excellent choice for you. Lightweight, very minimal rust. The only rust I really was able to find on it was on the back side of the trigger. There's that little groove, very minor surface rust up in there, and there's a tiny bit that had started forming on the hammer in one of the grooves. But other than that, this thing was rust free. So now these are two completely different guns, although they are very similar, but in their materials very different. This is a steel gun. I would imagine you would have the same problems or same issues with the Smith & Wesson or Ruger or whatever it may be, just because of the type of material it is. It's being that it's a ferrous metal. But considering that this one's been around for 30 years versus the other one for 10, it's got 20 years on it, I would say that this handled the elements very well. No complaints. There is going to be more maintenance just because of that, but you're going to get that with any ferrous metal firearm. So I would not use that as an excuse not to buy one. Man, this thing is fantastic. Just so you don't freak, son of a diddly.